Welcome, Cindy. Cindy Rasicot lives in Richmond, California, who I met in 2020 when she and I were publishing our first books with She Writes Press. And for about a year before our publication dates, we got to know each other. And we've remained close writing and personal friends ever since. So I will ask Cindy to introduce herself a little bit more, but I'm just delighted to have Cindy here for this conversation today. And I look forward to talking to her about her wonderful new book called, and I will hold it up, This Fresh Existence.
Oh, thank you. Oh, it's so fun to be with you, Gretchen. I'm a real fan of yours. I enjoyed your first book, Poetic License, and I'm on my way to reading your second book. About me, I'm an author. I'm a retired psychotherapist. For a while during the pandemic, I did a show called Casual Buddhism. Let me say, I'm a student, or as my teacher calls me, a disciple of Venerable Dhammananda Pikani. And she is the first fully ordained Theravada nun in Thailand. That means she was essentially the first female monk in her country's history, more than 700-year history. At the time she ordained, there were probably 300,000 male monks, and she was the first woman. Really, during the pandemic, people I felt needed contact and communication and connection. And so I had Gretchen on, and I think there was a wonderful conversation, and I still remember it. Essentially, Gretchen had a very heightened Buddhist experience where she was watching ants. And I think Venerable Dhammananda was surprised because she said, "Wow, that's a pretty advanced experience." And I think you said, "I'd really like to repeat it." And she said, basically, "You're going to have to practice." That's not quite how it came about. But anyway,
pretty close.
Yeah, these were lovely conversations there on YouTube under Casual Buddhism. And in addition, I spent it's been an 18-year journey for me. I say an 18-year journey, not writing the book. I wrote the book in probably 2 years, but living the experience of wanting to tell my teacher's story because she is a Buddhist and a feminist, and because she is a role model for me. She helped me redefine my femininity to be strength through vulnerability. And it was just a journey for me coming into myself. I struggled with depression, and she helped me overcome that through the practice. She helped me really become a happier, healthier, whole version of myself. And the reason why I wrote the book is because I benefited so much from her teachings on loving kindness, forgiveness, compassion.
And I can guess that I probably never would have been introduced to her if it hadn't been for you and the first book you wrote. But I felt that she was so personable. It was as if I'd known her forever. And I suspect that may be a little bit of what you've had with her too.
Oh, definitely.
Say a little bit about how you'd meet her when you were living in
Yes.
Bangkok.
Well, what I wanted to say is kind of funny. In the beginning, I wanted to write this book, but I ended up in the one that Gretchen just held up, because it turned out in the writing process, part of what I was doing was honoring my own journey, my own need to express and heal within myself. And I think that's why quite a few writers write, is to work through something or make sense of something or heal something. Anyway, so it turned out I needed to tell my story of how I met her, formed a relationship with her. And the first book really had to do with healing the mother wound, helping overcome some of the suffering I experienced with my own mother, who was a different person than me. But through Venerable Dhammananda's unconditional acceptance and love, I was able to kind of accept myself and forgive my mother. And that's pretty much the story in there. How I met Venerable, I'll call her also Long May, which is her name in Thai, which is Venerable Mother. I met her early on when my former husband of 33 years moved to Bangkok with our then 13-year-old son. In 2005, we lived there for 3 years till 2008. In October of 2005, I was looking for something to do. I was a quintessential expat wife, and you need to
Right.
find something to do. And I went to a conference in Bangkok put on by the Aid for Women in Development. And I was hoping to meet people. I have a background in feminist studies, so I was hoping to look for a women's organization or something to do with women. That's why I chose the conference. In the afternoon, there was a workshop called Faith, Feminism, and the Power of Love. And I thought, now who puts faith and feminism in the same sentence? I heard her speak, and she said something that kind of riveted me. Let me just say, I didn't go to Thailand looking for a spiritual teacher. It just happened. So when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yes,
And
so
that's what
true.
happened to me. In that
Yes.
moment, she said, we cannot solve anything with anger. It is much harder to practice loving kindness and compassion. That is the goal of Buddhism. And it was like, I don't know, I was just astonished. I was
Yes.
probably had chills. But at the end of that conference, she said, anyone who would like to come to the temple, go on alms round with us, see and experience what we're doing, please come. I think it happened on Sundays every week and then Buddhist holidays. It happened to be one pra, which is the full moon. So we went on alms round. And I think when you see it for the first time, the humility and the reverence with which the people hold their monastics, it moved me to tears, and the woman I was with to tears. It's just a very powerful experience.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how radical Venerable Dhammananda
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you came from a feminine studies background and you were partially interested in her and her workshop because of what it was named.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
and what struck me a couple of times in this new book is the degree to which she talks about how the Buddha believed that men and women were spiritual equals.
Yes.
And yet, in real life, in 700 years of Thai history, women weren't allowed to be monks or nuns. And so, this act of Venerable Dhammananda's to create, first of all, to get ordained herself, second
Yeah.
of all, to develop a temple, through which she could practice her spiritual gifts as well as support people who needed help. And what she has done is really remarkable. She is not afraid of saying that this is a radical thing and that she believes in feminism. So, talk a little bit, if you could, about that edge that she's walking that does seem very progressive as she speaks of it, and yet also fits within the culture that she is particularly working in.
Yeah. Got sort of educated, one might say radicalized, when she came to a conference at Harvard Divinity School in
Okay.
1983. She calls that her introduction to feminism. She had never heard of feminists before. She went to this conference. She calls it the Weeping Conference because women had been jailed, women were angry. There were women from all over the world. At that point, she was an active professor of Buddhist studies at Thammasat University. She did not tell people they did not know that the subject of her study was her own mother, Voramai Kabil Singh,
Right.
Venerable Voramai, who herself founded the temple in 1960, when Venerable was 11. So she had a
Right.
radical feminist mother to begin with in the monastic tradition.
Yeah.
I don't want to confuse people too much, but we say her mother was the first modern Thai bhikkhuni, but she was ordained in a different tradition.
Okay.
This is what Venerable decided in 1983. It was a big decision. She was going to come out of the ivory tower.
Right. Right.
She said, I have all this knowledge about women. I have to become an activist. She said, I wanted to fight and I wanted to stay spiritually sane. That's why she will say, I'm a Buddhist first and a feminist second. She says the Buddha was the first revolutionary because many people don't realize he ordained women in his lifetime. But what is so powerful is that she said, Buddhists walk against the tide. That's what Buddhists do. That's what the Buddha did. That's what I did. They dubbed her the rebel monk. Initially, I wanted to call this book Rebel Monk, and she said no,
Ah,
because I never saw myself as a rebel.
Yeah. Okay.
I simply saw myself as following the path of the Buddha because I have complete faith in him.
Yeah. Okay.
So she was deemed a rebel. She was deemed all sorts of things. There was hate messages,
She
threats.
had a lot of resistance, right?
In
Initially,
2001, well, let me summarize. In 1999 and 2000, she was making the decision that she wanted to become a monastic, and that was not a decision that she made just then. She knew before she was married that she would probably want to become a monastic. And she told her husband. But he was surprised when she actually eventually said 30
she
years
did.
later, I'm going to do it. It was probably April to June of 2001. All the conservative monks, and I mean, they said crazy things like women, if they're ordained, will be raped and it will ruin Buddhism and blah,
Mm,
blah, blah. I mean, there was just the
right.
crazy. It
Yep.
just, I mean, it's a very strict caste culture.
Yes.
And Thai, of course, this kind of mirrored that same view of women as, like menstruation was
Right. Right.
were considered impure, less smart than men, less capable of enlightenment, even though the Buddha ordained women in the Thai version. At the time Venerable Dhammananda ordained, the Thai monks basically believed that it wasn't possible because they claimed in history there were never any ordained Buddhist women, which was not true. There were 3 attempts in the history of Thailand to ordain women. The first was in 1928 by a very progressive man. He tried to ordain his 2 daughters. And the Sangha, which the Council of Elders, which is the highest level of the Thai Buddhist community, ruled that they came up with the Sangha Act, 1928, which said monks cannot ordain women.
Mm, okay.
That law is still on the
Still
books.
on the books. Wow.
So when Venerable Dhammananda wanted to be ordained, she got the nickname Stone because when she's determined to do something, she does it.
She
And I've
did.
seen that woman lift a hoe over her head and she came down into that dirt. She's a powerful source of determination and an incredible sense of compassion. So it's a very,
Mm. It's a
very fabulous combination.
Well, so just picking up on that incredible combination of determination and compassion, which
Mhm.
to me, as someone who worked with many leaders over my career in consulting, were 2 elements that I frequently saw in the best leaders. They were determined about something, they had a vision, their goal, or they knew what they were trying to achieve. And at the same time, they had a great deal of empathy and or compassion, sort of humanity for how to get their company, let's say, from A to B. And so I was thinking about Dhammananda as a leader as I was reading this book. And I wonder if you might speak to how does she come across as a leader in her
Well,
daily routine
I
or her
can
and her
sort of take
community?
a backed up view and a close
Yeah,
view.
okay.
The backup view is I view her as a moral and spiritual compass for our times.
Okay.
Because let me give you an example. Just this last week, NPR did a poll in which 1 in 5
Mm.
Americans said they believed this country would need to resort to
Yes.
violence to get back on track.
Yes, I saw that.
And here is Venerable Dhammananda, a feminist, a Buddhist, saying we cannot solve anything with anger.
Yes.
So we need strong voices like hers to push back against the message of hatred and intolerance and to replace it with a message of loving kindness and compassion. And that's what she does. So she is a feminist role model for me, as well as on a personal level, very kind, very present. At the temple, I would say, first of all, she's very charismatic.
Yeah.
She talks about how she has to be careful with her expression because she says, when she gets a serious expression, people say, "Oh, Venerable Mother is mad at me." And she's like,
Right.
"No, I'm not mad at you. I'm just thinking about things." People regard her very highly. Her word is very
Yeah.
important. Anyway, but as far as a spiritual leader, she's both a leader in her temple, of course, but in the world, I would say.
Yes. That too.
I wrote the book because I wanted people to hear about her, and
Yes.
people don't know about her.
Right. Well,
And yeah,
I
go
mean, the
ahead.
book strikes me as a very and I mean this in a very positive way, a very accessible story about not only her, but also you and your spiritual growth and path. I found it a really open and accessible treatise, if you will, on what Buddhism is really about. And I found each one of the sections had something that was speaking directly to me. And I think the thing that really hit me the most, which sounds so simple, but it just really struck me differently reading it in the book and hearing it in her voice, that we breathe in to nourish ourselves and we breathe out to nourish others. It's such a simple idea and yet so darn hard to do, you know, in the moment or most moments, or at least sometime during every day. I agree with you that people who can lift up a different kind of voice and help us all learn how to live together better uh, are definitely needed. I'm curious, Cindy, as you have gotten to know Dhammananda, you've become a very close. Can you talk a little bit about how you maintain that relationship when you're 10,000 miles away, and also how you see it proceeding as you go forward?
Very nice question. Let me just also thank you for giving one of the essential teachings of Buddhism, which is we all are interconnected and our breath is a simple way to understand our interconnection. Dhammananda's definition of Buddhism, which is heart. We have a heart-to-heart connection, and that is both spiritual. I can feel it now as I'm talking. It's just like a warmth in my heart. It's nothing too woohoo. And let me share a funny story, because it wasn't always so. In my first book, I talk about how I have a back problem. I go to Munich for surgery. I pray to Dhammananda and the medicine Buddha for a year. And I really had built Dhammananda up in my head. And I go back to the temple a year after I first met her. And I bow to her and I realize she doesn't have a clue who I am. She doesn't remember me. And I know that I made a decision. I'm going to get to know you. You and I are going to be connected. I don't know why that happened,
Yeah.
but let's just say that in my way, I have a determination. Let's say what she was selling.
Yes. Right. Okay.
She had
Yeah.
something I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the connection really started then. That was 2006. And we became very close because I spent a lot of time with her. I admired her.
Yeah.
She's a teacher, but she questions.
Right.
I think I appeal to her because I'm always asking questions. And she never tired of my questions. So that maybe we became so connected is high society. They revere their monastics so much that she can't have an open relationship with Thai women.
Hmm.
That
Okay.
is not possible. I think as a foreigner, I allowed her some freedom within the relationship to be something more.
Love that. Yeah. That's awesome. And
And
and so going forward, do you see yourself returning to Thailand periodically?
she's teaching a class in May in case any of your listeners would like to
Mm.
participate. It's a Zoom conversation, May 15th, 22nd, and 29th. It's called Groundbreaking Courage, and it's at Spirit Rock, and you just go to
Oh,
their
wow.
sign up.
Okay.
You can hear her, and I'd encourage you to do that if you're
Yeah.
drawn to her in what I'm describing. So I last saw her September of last year, that might be the last time I see her. And she wrote me a very beautiful note, which basically said, I'm so glad we've met in this lifetime and we'll share again. And, it kind of had that aspect of, we'll go on. So I'm going back. And that's unusual for me to go back within 9 months. And I think she's in a little bit of declining health.
Mhm.
So it's important for me to
Yes. Check in with her and be
check in with
there.
her. And how I
Right.
maintain with her is it's not about maintaining, we're inextricably connected
Yes. Okay.
to our hearts. So she's so advanced spiritually. When she's there, she's 100% present with you.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's what was so beautiful to me about her. It's
Yeah.
like you can
Yeah.
feel her presence. And it's not like she knew my history. She knew
Yeah.
what I needed to hear.
Yeah. I was totally wowed by her. Um, and it strikes me that part of that was part of your healing maternal journey that you had been on.
Absolutely.
And it's such a great lesson for all of us who mother in whatever way we mother, whether it's biologically or adopted or just people in our life who we have some form of mother relationship with. Just that presence and full attention is certainly a great thing to emulate in her, for sure.
And unconditional acceptance.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced that before. I think it changed me as a person. I
Okay.
became a fuller, how can I say this? I became more of the woman that I was meant to be. And by that, I mean, I was able to adopt strength through femininity, strength through vulnerability.
Yes.
I was
Okay.
able to be more vulnerable, more open. My heart was more open because she got in there.
Got in there.
And, you know, that's what loving kindness does. It
Yeah.
opens you. When you're in the presence of someone who loves to that degree, I'm sure it happens for people with the Dalai Lama too. They must just be,
Of
whoa.
course. Right. Wow.
So it helped me become a fuller, more joyful, happier version of myself. I don't struggle with depression as much. But other than that, I think
Yep.
she just helped me become a better woman.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Well,
Mhm.
Cindy, you have had an incredible experience with her and you've written two wonderful books. I really highly recommend both of them. The first one, in a sense, is a more traditional memoir. We really get to see Cindy in her expat life and also in the way that she first meets Samananda. And then the second one is really both a little bit of a book about you and Dominanda, but also has some real teachings in it for any of us that have an interest in Buddhism in whatever form we have that. So I encourage everybody to go out and look at where they can buy it.
As always, you and I share this, encourage you to buy from independent bookstores when you can. If they don't have it, ask them to order it. It's distributed through Ingram. It's available to any independent bookstore.
And
That's
once
on my
again,
website. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
it was so fun talking to you, and I could talk to you forever. I am interested in just one other thing. We always get asked this question right after we put out a brand new book. So, what are you writing next? As if we shouldn't just love and identify the celebration of
Oh,
the book
interesting.
itself. But do you have another book in your sights at this point?
No, I do not.
Okay.
What I'm doing is very exciting. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm teaching because I've been a
Great.
therapist and a spiritual, I'm a spiritual teacher now.
Yeah.
And basically, there'll be healing circles for women where we do guided visualization, writing prompts. We walk labyrinths if there's a labyrinth on the grounds.
Yep.
I bring in a little art therapy.
Yeah.
It's, what Venerable taught me is the feminine voice is powerful and we have not been heard. We need to tell our stories. She told her
Yes.
story. She spoke up. Each one of us who out there who is listening, tell your story.
Yes. Thank
It's
you.
not just Gretchen and I, it's all of
For
us.
sure. We
And
need everybody.
the more we put out women's stories, and frankly, I think there's some point at which Venerable Dominanda says in the book, I think the world's been in the hands of men long enough. So there are many wise women out there with many stories to tell. So tell your story.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cindy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Take care.